Welcome to Zeros and Ones, podcast about philosophy, ancient wisdom, and the meaning of life. Here is your host, Becka Thompson. Oh my goodness. I've had a bit of a morning because I thought my entire book was lost from my computer. That was scary. We're in puffy eye season, so if you're watching this on your computer, I apologize for my puffy eyes. I am Sami. We're not sure how much because my grandfather hid it. And we don't know my grandmother. My grandfather was 100% Sami. My grandmother, we're not sure. So I don't know if my father is 50% or fully, right? If you look at him, he looks fully Sami, which would make me either half or a quarter. And it's the eyes. My whole life, my mother, who's very English and Irish and Scottish and all those things, was like, you have your father's eyes, more so than my siblings. And when it's going great, I've always gotten compliments on my eyes. So thank you for all the people who compliment me on my eyes. It's just DNA. Thank you. I appreciate it. I've gotten positive feedback my entire life, so that's good. But as I get older and the seasons change, I wake up and they're just puffy because they're squinty eyes. They're like squinty eyes. And my mother and others, this is a sign you need to take better care of yourself. Likely true. I actually, this is probably TMI, but I go to a place and have been getting facials there for years, and it closed, and during COVID they had like 3 spots right in town, and the one that I used to always go to closed. COVID. Okay, so I found my backup. That was a little further from my house, but whatever. A month ago, closed. 2 months ago or whatever, just in the summer, closed. I'm like, what the heck? And they said on their website for the longest time, like, just it was going to be temporary. No, permanently closed. And so now there's only one left, but it's all over. Just to go to get a facial, I don't know. I just don't get it. And it's frustrating, to say the least, because it's frustrating, It's frustrating. I am desperately wanting to get my book back on my computer, not just in the cloud. That's what had happened today. I clicked on the file and it said, you can't open things that are in the cloud. And I was like, what? How did this happen? And I freaked out a little bit, modest freak out. But we found it. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. I was telling the good people of the TikTok, because I thought I was just going to be able to, maybe I could get them back up and going. I thought I was just going to be able to do a TikTok live while I'm doing this, I'm like, hey, howdy doody. It's howdy doody time. And then that didn't work out very well. That didn't work out very well at all. But because I couldn't find my thing. I need to not have TikTok right in my face, though, because it kind of freaks me out. But so today's topic, I was telling the TikTok crowd of what came up in my mind as to why I wrote this book. And I don't want to necessarily get into it all over again. But it has come from my childhood going to church. And we have truly come to the breach, once more into the breach, dear friends, in our topics. Now we are a few episodes in to the podcasts, which aren't all online yet. Well, they are. Just you can go to YouTube podcasts is where they all are, and Spotify. There's a couple of them not fully done there yet. And we've come to it, okay. And which is our topic of today, which is astronomy. Astronomy. So there's something so natural about staring up at the stars, right? It is the original human pursuit. It is the original. It's the OG human endeavor. I don't think that there's any way to deny that that it is the OG human endeavor. Because if you've ever been to dark sky country, we deal with such immense light pollution. And if you know anything about me, I live in Minneapolis, and I oftentimes go up to northern Minnesota. Part of the reason, actually, why I moved back home, air quotes, because this is where I was born, from my time, excuse me, I've got a little crusty in my throat this morning too, in New York and Los Angeles, was the quick ability to see the night sky. LA, because everybody has a car, it wasn't that bad, but you definitely had to drive several hours. New York, it was just really hard because how do you get out of town? You have to take the train just like way out into the boondocks for hours and hours. But the night sky, they actually have big sky designations now, dark sky designations. In the United States, at the very least, about where you can see the stars. I'm gonna tell you that this is unplanned. Okay, I have a lot of planned things I want to talk about, but this particular thing is unplanned, and I'm gonna say it because it's coming to my mind. This is a shout out to a guy named Aaron. I don't even know his last name. He's from the Midwest, but he was living in Toronto when I met him. We met, and we're set up as buddies. During what I can only call my walkabout. But it was marketed as survival training. I'm not getting paid by these people at all, but they deserve a massive shout out, which is a place called Boulder Outdoor Survival School. I would go back immediately, but it's just logistically challenging. I learned more about myself in that week in the desert than probably any other moment since. And Aaron was my buddy. So what it was is we went into the desert. You sign up for this. You sign up to be starved. To be starved and not get any sleep. The premise was you get lost in the wilderness, right? And how do you survive? So the first few days they get you disoriented. This is Boulder Outdoor Survival School. But you go in with guides. So the first few days you get, yourself disoriented on purpose, sort of, and then you learn the survival skills. I only did the week version. People go in there for a month. But it's very serious. The very first thing you do before you go into you have to prove that you can physically do it. And then there's you take a rubbing of your shoe, and they keep them on file while you're gone in case you get lost. And they're like, oh yeah, no, people have gotten lost in the desert. That's that. And it almost happened to me. That's a different story. Oh man, there's so many stories from that time. But Aaron was assigned to be my buddy because I came there all alone. I'm one of the few people that just showed up by myself. And he had actually come with a friend, but the friend was assigned a different buddy, and he was assigned my buddy. And he took that job very seriously, and I really appreciate him. Like I said, I don't even know his last name. Really, really good guy. And we spent this week in the desert, and we were carrying our stuff, and we were lost, and we were exhausted, and blah, blah, blah. And then the last night, our guides kind of meet us at a place. We had to find ourselves through the topographical map, which of course we got lost, and oh my gosh, they almost left me behind. I had to go to the bathroom. This is a story you probably don't want to hear. I had to go to the bathroom, and I told somebody, and then the sweep is that literally you just have to count to make sure that everybody in the group is there, and they didn't count me. And I get up from the bathroom, and it's just like desert in front of me. But I started running, and I found them, and I just started screaming at the sweep, like, your job was literally to count to 9. But so anyway, Aaron and I, our guides had found us. They took they actually had a truck. It's the first time I saw a vehicle or a road of any sort in a week. And they put our stuff inside and they said, okay, we've put some glow sticks and we want you to walk out of the desert. And it was the first time, and it was the dead of night, and you just followed the glow stick. It was 13 miles. It wasn't like a short trip out. But Aaron and I walked out the whole way, and your eyes adjust under the big sky of the desert of Utah. That's where it was. Grand Escalante National Monument. And I honestly don't have words. I mean, this is a podcast. I suppose I'm trying to describe it to you, but I don't have words. He and I we talked about how this is our church, right? And he talked about growing up in a conservative church, and so did I, and we shared about a bunch of stuff, and talked about, we were just truly in awe of the stars, because I think that's what the heavens do to us. I think that's a natural response. And one of the saddest things that I've discovered about cities and our predisposition to keep building them. And I actually had a council member friend say that, one of the solutions to violence in the city was to have more floodlights like everywhere at night. And I was like, hard pass. Hard pass. Like, I get the logic, but like, do you not comprehend what we're losing with this unnatural light? We're losing the stars, and we're losing our connection to ourselves. So here's a quote. As I said, we always start with a quote. Here's a quote of Kepler. And if you don't know who Johannes Kepler is, you should. Here's a brief little thing on Johannes Kepler. Kepler actually was the one who finally put forward something that made people accept the heliocentric universe. Okay? So it's a big deal, Kepler. And I'm going to talk a bit about that. And I just want to set the table. Okay, you guys can put whatever meal you want on your plate, but there's definitely things to consider. We talked about that what we're doing is a sort of a proof, but of course, again, proof is a delicate, nuanced thing. I'm drinking my. It's really just ice at this point, which is, I love ice. The heliocentric universal model is absolutely important in knowing what and who we are, and what I see as the big deception. But Johannes Kepler was a brilliant man, astronomer, mathematician, physicist, early levels. But you should know that his mother, while he was coming up with all this stuff, was at threat of burning at the stake by the church with a capital C. Because there's nothing in science and religion that is separate. That's what I would love everybody to understand. Science and religion is never separate. It has never been separate. It still is not separate. I see these signs of people being like, I believe the science. You don't even know what that is. That is the same dogmatic expression as I believe God, and then no questions of what God is. We're going to get into that. Okay. So, Johannes Kepler, here's Kepler's quote. I had the intention of becoming a theologian, but now I see how God is, by my endeavors, also glorified in astronomy. For the heavens declare the glory of God. And that quote to me sums up a lot of what I am motivated to help distill the confusion, because we don't, as a society anymore, look up every night at the stars. We don't. Do you know the Walt Whitman poem, I Heard the Learned Astronomer? I heard the learned astronomer, the facts and figures on the stage, and how soon unaccustomed I became, tired and sick, till striding and gliding out into the mystical moist night air, I happened to look upon the stars, right? I don't know, that was the Cliff Notes version of an already short poem, but you get the gist. Is that I, like, looking out at the stars, right, is the thing that, like, you can just, all the science and equation in the world is something's missing. Something's missing. And especially I think of all these people who live in cities and live in saturated light and never see the stars. So when I was a little kid, we're going to start with the story. Let's start at the very beginning. There will always be a song. There will always be a song. I was a little kid walking along the Mississippi, or along Lake Superior, which is where I often go still to see the night sky. And there was a bright full moon. And I was looking at the moon, and, I was young enough, I think I was like 6 or 7. And I asked my father, why didn't the moon move? All these other things moved. We're on a walk, right? Like, we see that boat, it moves. We see the branch, it moves. The big, the lodge we were staying in, we walked away, we came back, right? But the moon never appeared to move. And my father explained to me perspective, right? And he talked about where the moon was, and how, the distance. And that sent me on a fascination that has never left me. It was that fascination that ultimately had me studying math. And plainly, if I were to remain in academia, which, I mean, I could study my whole life. It's just the most fun thing. But how much student debt do you want? Do you know what I mean? So this is when I became an autodidact. Is astrophysics. Astrophysics is just fascinating to me. We charted out Halley's Comet when I was in middle school. I was obsessed with the lunar mission. I wasn't alive, but I know that in 1969 people got on the moon. Although now, sure looks like a lot of Hollywood, and I can explain to you why I think that. Sorry, it's just my eyes. Okay, so here's what I want. These are all interactive. We're interactive here. We're good friends. We're interactive. What is your first memory of seeing the stars? Okay. So why don't you just, think about that? Can you picture the night sky? Can you picture the moon? Like how about a big orange harvest moon? We have these astronomical events, and everyone wants to see it. Why? Why is it special? What is a solar eclipse? We know what people tell us, but what is it? Are you with me? So when we think about the stars, we are immediately thrust into a realm that we cannot, and okay, I'm going to say it, we cannot possibly understand it. We cannot. Okay, so we can't talk about astronomy without talking about light. All right? And there are two major things of light that I want to talk to you about. And it has to do with this beautiful these devices that are being captured, right? But let's talk about light. So, the light of the sun, okay? What is that? It's a little cloudy here in Minneapolis as I record this. The sun was out yesterday. What is the sun? You can go ahead and Google search it. You can go ahead and look for books on it. And I'm going to tell you right now, people who study this, what we call scientists, don't know. And ask yourself, is that surprising? Is it surprising that we don't know what the sun is? Literally just ask yourself that. Because logically, we again, all the people with their, I believe, science, right? What are you talking about when you say that? Because what that does is it makes it seem as though we have the power to categorize these things. How on earth would we ever possibly know what the sun is? Did we send a probe inside of it? I'm being totally logistically serious. If we sent a probe inside to see what the sun is, what would happen? We all know. It would burn up before it got even close. And if it was sending data back to the to the world, to the Earth, likely all it would send back is a heat metric before it burned into oblivion. The mere thought is absurd. Oh, the mere thought of us trying to. Can you imagine a manned spacecraft? Like this is a meeting at NASA. People are getting exploration. We went to the moon. We got our satellites out there. We've got our crafts way deep into space. We're sending pictures back from Pluto. We're sending pictures back. But we still don't know what the sun is. So what we need to do is we need to gather some data of the sun. And what we're going to do is I just need 2 people, 2 volunteers. And what we're going to do is we'll man the spacecraft right into the sun. And we're going to see if it is in fact a binary star. And we are also going to see, hopefully, that we can take some samples of the core of the sun. Who wants to volunteer? Yeah, those hands will raise real fast as you go on your actual suicide mission. It's so absurd Hollywood doesn't even make movies about it. Like, why bother? Interstellar to the sun. Okay, but what scientists think the sun is made of, is ever-burning hydrogen. Okay. Let's also dispel the stupidity of this. This reminds me of what's the song that I told you there's always going to be singing. Who's the band? The Eternal Flame. You know what I'm talking about. This eternal flame. Okay, all right. So let's go back to basic physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? Basic. So there must be a source. In everything, there's a source. Everything. Springs of water have a source, right? But there's gaseous pummelings underneath in the core, right? And you might say, well, that it has a source in the toroidal field, which we're going to get to. Okay, so all physics. That's why the last episode was geometry, which actually went up an hour ago. So I'm recording this, but I've never done a TikTok live. So you guys likely probably didn't listen to that. But there's actually a geometry to everything. That's why geometry. We talk about geometry before we talk about astronomy. But so in the toroidal field, the geometry, like there, it turns and it makes sense. But in our heliocentric, right, which we talked about with Kepler, starting off the jump, whose mother was being threatened to be burned at the stake as he's doing his scientific exploration. So that was in pressure. I mean, my goodness, I can't imagine people being like, okay, go do your work. How's the work coming? If you want your mother to stay alive. Hello, Church Gestapo. Good morning. Your mother is still alive, but later today we might burn her at the stake, depending on the outcomes of your experiments. I am just interpreting the data, the human toll data. But so I'll tell you right now, if, big capital if, the sun is an internal ball of ever-burning hydrogen, okay? It needs a supply source. Based within our model of astronomy, it needs a supply source, okay? Which means somewhere across the galaxy, across the universe, the ever-expanding universe that we all talk about that is, right? Which I'm here to tell you, I don't know that I believe that. And that is measured by trigonometric parallax, which there might be other things mathematically as to why that's happening with stars up against the backdrop of the backdrop of the backdrop of the backdrop. But if, big capital I, if that is true, that means there's a black hole somewhere else on the far side of somewhere else feeding our sun, which that is pretty badass, right? I mean, that's pretty badass. But those are the only two options. Those are the only two options. We don't know what the sun is, okay? So let's just talk a little bit about it, because like the heliocentric model of the universe that everybody is tacitly accepting, and I'm telling you, you shouldn't. If you are going to question the God of the Bible and be like, well, there's no evidence that God is real, I will tell you that the evidence of the heliocentric universe is as tenuous, okay? First of all, Nicholas Copernicus, he didn't want Das Revolutionis, he didn't want that published. It was an idea, and it was also in the Protestant Reformation, and he actually was being leaned on by by his boss, who was best friends with a guy named Philip Melanchthon, who was best friends with a guy named Martin Luther. Have you heard of him? So Luther was standing up against the church and the church's doctrine. Okay? So that is Doubt. There's a John Patrick Shanley play called Doubt that Philip Seymour Hoffman, Amy Adams, and Meryl Streep did a play version of it, like a movie version of the play. It was before Philip Seymour Hoffman died, so it must have been 15 years ago. And that to me is it's a brilliant play, and it has layers, but it's the idea is, what is doubt? How is doubt? What do we use to convince ourselves, right? That is that exercise in theater. But this, to me, there's some sprinklings of doubt. Copernicus and Kepler alone, not to mention Galileo, and the moons of Jupiter, which also the Medicis were his benefactors, and they were also in power. The Medicis were / are most popes, which reminds me, I want to go see Conclave soon. So I started this talking about why I don't go to church anymore, and all of these things, right? So let's think about what we know, though. We know stars. They are there. We see them, right? We see the sun. And if in the last time I was quoting C.S. Lewis, it's not only that you see the sun, it's that by it you see everything else. So let's talk about optics, okay? Because the world is optics. Everything is optics, okay? So how do we know what we do know about the universe, about the stars? Our pictures, okay? Is light. Well, everything is light. Everything is light. Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. We are part of a team, and we are awesome, and everything is light. It's no accident that the first words of Genesis are, and God said, let there be light, okay? Before I go too deep down that rabbit hole, I wanted to tell you about the fact that, let's just unpack that, okay? And a reminder, I wrote a book. It's called One, the Biography of All Things. I'm gonna hopefully have it out before the holidays. I thought I lost it on my files on my computer this morning. I freaked out, but it's there. Okay, so in the beginning, right? This is Genesis. And God said, let there be light. In that phrase, okay, we can't go into this thinking the way we thought as a child. That's also in the Psalms, Proverbs, something. When I was a child, I reasoned like a child, right? I saw like a child, I thought like a child. When I became grown, an adult, right? In the Bible, the interpretation is when I became a man, right? It says that when you became an adult, right? I put childish ways behind me. Well-meaning parents of the church these days will say things like, oh, it's very, they use that Bible verse to be like, you don't waste your time on the Rubik's Cube, right? I don't know if you guys can see this. It's a podcast, but there's video happening. Don't waste your time on the Rubik's Cube, right? That's what well-meaning parents use as a bludgeon to curb their own child's creativity. But the reality is we need to get out of the childish thinking, okay? And children are the most wonderful thing on the planet. But the childish thinking of when we first heard these things, because our brains, when you're little, are literal, okay? They are moon. When I was 6 or 7, I actually thought if I walked far enough, I could get there, because the backdrop of what I was seeing, it looked like part of the picture, right? I can walk there, right? But I can't because of density, okay? Not because of anything else, because of density, which we'll talk about. Even Einstein and Newton didn't entirely agree on what gravity was. That is the theory of relativity, which we can get into later. We're going to get into that when we talk about physics. We're still trying to stay on topic of astronomy. This is why I had to break everything down, because it is one, and everything leads and curves back to one. But so let's go back to that phrase in Genesis, the very beginning. And God said, very important, let there be light. Okay? We are not supposed to think of a literal, well, we are. Said. Okay? And we haven't talked about what God is yet, but it's Yod and Yod. Just think, okay, which we'll get to. Said. Okay? So I'm now currently pointing at my throat, which is inside of my throat. I actually saw this. I had a probe shoved down my mouth when I was a student at the Juilliard School because I had vocal nodes. So I have seen a picture of my own vocal folds working, which is fascinating. It's weird to get you're like, oh, here's a fun story. Mariah Carey was in the room next to me. I could hear her because I was at this super fancy voice doctor in on the Upper East Side. That was pretty cool. I was like, and I told all my friends at Juilliard, they're like, how did it go today? Because they knew I had to go do these things. And I was like, Mariah Carey was in the room next to me. It was crazy. Anyway, so I've seen it. Okay, so your voice, sound. Okay, what is sound a part of? Why and how are you able to hear me right now? Because your ears, there's a vibration in your head that receives the vibration in my throat. That's how that happens. And both sound and light are part of the one, which is, spoiler alert, called the electromagnetic spectrum. Electromagnetism. Okay? So, in the beginning, God said, let there be light. That is the opening opus. Yeah, I saw that. Of the one, of the toroidal field of everything that exists. So when we look at the stars, that's light. But it also might be something else. And I'm just here to tell you that we don't know what that is. We like to claim that we do. But our pictures are just optics. And optics can be manipulated by, you get it, light. I've got a light on me. I've got a light here. You can't see me without that light. My objective person are dense particles. This is physics, y'all. Don't you remember when you're in school and you learn that everything is just made up of atoms, and then you're like, oh man, so can my atoms go into somebody else's atoms? And in theory, yes. And then we make these science fiction movies about it, and the Matrix and all this kind of stuff. But the reason why my body is a hard-packed density, and the reason you see me right now is because of light, because I have light shining on me, and the light of these devices is picking it up, and your eyes are taking it in. Your eyes are, oh my gosh, we aren't on this topic yet, but if you could only know how incredible your own body is. I mean, we all take them for granted. Honestly, like how incredible our own bodies are is really, so your eyes interpret the light. And have you ever seen a close-up picture of an eye? It looks like a complete vortex, like a black hole. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Yeah, so I'm skipping around here because I know I'm talking a long time. I don't know what time I'm on right now because I don't have my 40 minutes. Oh, chihuahua. We haven't even talked about Copernicus. Oh, okay. There's a great picture I have about the spheres. So I mentioned about how Copernicus came up with. So Copernicus, I actually got to go to the university in Krakow where Copernicus was studying, and I was with my business school at the time. Oh man, my TikTok shut down. It's gonna screw over my life. Did it keep going? I don't know. It's all frozen. But de revolutionibus, it's Latin, orbium coelesterium, the revolutions of the celestial orbits. And it was printed posthumously. He didn't necessarily want it printed. So it's really difficult to talk about this without talking about the Catholic Church, the Holy Roman Empire, and what was going on at the time of the Reformation. So after 1,000 years of being in charge, so if you don't know, the Holy Roman Empire, of course, came out of Rome, and then I can't wait to see Conclave. I'm seeing it later today. They ruled the world. They planted all the kings of Europe. That's why all the early kings and queens, they had to swear allegiance to the crown, to the Pope, and they were all interrelated, right? It was all interrelated. And Martin Luther was like not a fan of this, right? And it really, like, when you think of it, the Protestant Reformation and then what came out of Henry VIII, and subsequent to him, Queen Elizabeth, and the launch of essentially the United States of America that came out of that, Sir Walter Raleigh. That's a whole history lesson of another time. It's fascinating, and I really feel like sometimes, again, when you're children, you learn these things as facts because it's really truly all that your brain can handle. And many adults are just put as a cog in the wheel of the system, and we are meant to stop deeply learning. We're meant to stop deeply questioning, in a way. If I can be cynical, which I'm always a little sliver of cynicism. But the founding of our nation, actually, you have to go way back, right? It has to go way back. To really understand and appreciate what was happening. I know right now in our country we've got a lot of people who are not fans of our nation, but the United States of America it was literally thousands of years in the making. If you look back at history, of what we're able to be, and you see the forces. Like, again, you have to be the person staring out there from the star Sirius, looking down upon everybody. Okay, so I'm talking for a long time, so I'm gonna try to get back onto the topic of astronomy and not get too far off. Although maybe we'll just break this into two. I don't know. Maybe we'll just break it into two things, and we'll come on and we'll do a midweek astronomy for whatever we don't get done. I'm really trying to keep the podcasts a little, So let's talk about two quick things that, to me, are very clear evidence disproving the heliocentric model of the universe. So we can leave it at that, and then the next time we can talk about what evidence would support it, right? And I think the fundamental error actually has to do with two major mathematical things that happened later on, which are gravity and the idea of a globe, which we'll talk about. And I don't want people to think I'm totally crazy. This is 100% based in studying science and mathematics. Okay, so an analemma, have you guys ever heard of that? An analemma is if I were to, walk outside to this beautiful parkway near my house every single day at the same time. And of course, we just had daylight savings time last night, right? So, boop, boop, what does that mean, right? At the same time, you'd have to, not be doing the daylight savings time. Every single day for a year, you would see the sun, or any star, but the sun is the easiest one to find, right? Trace out a very specific shape. It looks like a bowling ball pin, but each one is slightly different. But the point is that it's like an ellipses. It circles back on itself. It's called an analemma. If the universe is expanding and Earth is hurtling around the sun in the Milky Way at whatever 1,000 miles per second that they talk about, right? An analemma is mathematically impossible. So remember, we talked the last time, you had to listen to my podcasts, but it's brand new. It's only been out for like 2-3 weeks. We talked about irrational numbers and proof by contradiction, okay? Proof by contradiction in the world of mathematics is very big, okay? So I sometimes wonder to myself, this model that physicists are stating and mathematicians, like, why don't mathematicians get in league with these astrophysicists and say, this is mathematically impossible? Because it is mathematically impossible. The two things don't fadge. Which that's my old school Shakespeare. How will this fadge? That's right. Get you some Romeo and Juliet right in the middle of all this. That is 12th Night, Thompson. Come on now. That is not R&J. That is 12th Night. I'm sorry. I almost led you astray with my Shakespeare. Which Shakespeare plays a role in all this. Sidebar. Okay, so an analemma is mathematically impossible. And I want to just tell you something. There's something called grand unified field theory. And I wrote a trilogy, which you can find one of the books. It was a trilogy, and now it's become like a decalogy, but I'm working on rebooting them and writing them for teenagers. But you can find the first one on my in my link tree and on my different bios, but about two young girls who are trying to solve grand unified field theory, and then one of them becomes a heroic time traveler. Yeah. The time. I mean, I've been obsessed with time travel my whole life because actually time exists in the now. The thing that prevents us from being able to time travel is actually our human bodies, because we do actually that's another part of another book. But at any rate, I visited that, and then I wanted to revisit it, so that's why I had all the 3 trilogies written, and they were actually on Amazon, and then I pulled the books because I wanted to revisit it in a different way. But the first one of the revisitation is on. It's a constant work in progress. But at any rate, what were you talking? Oh, these girls are trying to find grand unified field theory, and grand unified field theory is a real thing in physics. Okay, that astrophysics, which we're talking about, and quantum mechanics, which is also physics, which will be talking about, they do not work together. They do not. That's why my book is titled "One: The Biography of All Things," because grand unified field theory, if you get really, really, really big, which is astronomy, and you get really, really, really small, which is quantum mechanics, they don't work together. It's entirely different sets of mathematics, and that is the current state of physics. Do you think living in the constants of time restricts us as beings? Well, we are stuck in time. We are absolutely stuck in time. We can talk about that. That's a good question. It absolutely does, but that's part of what we signed up for. There's no question that being trapped in our three-dimensional bodies is limiting. But your mind is not limited. That's the whole point of all this. We are players on the board of a game. Now I'm getting off on philosophy, and it's not in the day's topic that I wanted, but we are players on the board in a game of life. And every day is a gift. And the sad part is that we as a society, as a world, we have been told a lot of untrue things with which to keep us trapped inside of the thinking that is a slave's mindset. And I know that word is very charged in America, so I'm meaning it in the universal slavery of the mind. And time has to do with that. Societal tropes and traps have us obsessed with time, obsessed with death, obsessed with earmarks. I'm not successful by age 30, so therefore I'm a failure, right? Who's counting? Like, literally, who's the one counting, right? Which is like utter and complete and total nonsense. I'm so glad you agree. Thank you. So before I go way off on tangential things, which tangent is math, thank you very much. Another thing that is mathematically impossible with the current model that we have of us following around the sun and the sun hurtling through the universe into an unknown destination towards a gravitational pull of something that we don't see or know against the backdrop of stars that are moving a tiny little bit. We're using the backdrop to try to claim that the universe is expanding on the initial Big Bang, which may or may not be true, but mathematically impossible is Polaris. Mathematically impossible is Polaris. Do you guys know what Polaris is? So I live in Minnesota. So there's actually a company that does I mean, I'm sure they're fun, but again, I like to be able to hear things, and I like to be able to see things. So I like a dark sky, and I like a silent night. I'm gonna drink my water / ice, and I'm gonna chew my ice. I'll cut that out of the recording, I promise. Maybe not. But Polaris in Minnesota is a company that makes snowmobiles. But Polaris is a star called the North Star, right? Because it is always in north. Polaris, if you could take a photograph of the night sky in like a open, that you can find these online. Go Google search them. Of the night sky, like on a time lapse, and it is a perfect circle, and the center is Polaris. That is mathematically impossible in our heliocentric model of the universe. It is impossible. Impossible. I don't know how many times I need to say that before people might start to get and say, so maybe the model isn't correct. Or maybe the model is incomplete. Okay? Maybe the model is incomplete. At the very least, I hope that, like I said with the John Patrick Shanley play, I have dripped just a modicum of doubt inside. Okay? So, yes, there is a lot to the model that can be questioned. Absolutely. And the thing is, people say all the time, history is written by the winners, right? We want to revisit these things all the time, right? But when it comes to science, we don't revisit it. We just call it gospel truth. And these are from people who don't necessarily know what science is. So I think we should look at the stars. I really firmly believe that if we didn't have things saturated so much in the night sky, we would question these things more. But most people live in a city or a suburb, and they don't question it because they don't see it. So I think I'm going to do there'll be a little bit of a part 2 on astronomy. because there has to be, because I'm on time. And we didn't really talk about Galileo or Copernicus or counting or the Freemasons or wormholes, or like we didn't really dive deep into light. Everything is light and density, perspective. And I like it is so simple. So I love this movie called What About Bob? We'll end on this. If you've never seen What About Bob, please go see it. It came out like, oh my gosh, like 30 years ago now. Holy bananas. Pretty close to 30 years ago. It is Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss. Julie Haggerty's in it. Charlie Korsmo. And I actually know the woman who's the girl. And I'm completely blanking on her name right now. What About Bob is a hilarious, ridiculous psychology movie about who's really crazy, right? But Bob at one point, he thinks he's in death therapy. And Bob says, oh, it's so simple, yet so brilliant. That is our world. That is our world. And it's actually far simpler than we've been told. It's far simpler than we've been told. And I really deeply believe that everything has been made complicated to keep us confused. Because, I mean, I get terrified at the thought if people really knew how simple it was. Because of the fact that it's like, what will people do with this knowledge? I don't know. Knowledge is power. So instead, we just dress it up and we put it in a box and say, we are much more powerful than we've been led to believe. Absolutely. And it starts with our bodies. I've always been a big athlete, and I haven't been exercising as much right now because I've been just working and building things. And I quit eating meat. And a lot of that is partly because of the fact that it's like, okay, I want to get down to the nitty gritty of my body and then rebuild it. Not based on feeling a need to fit into a societal idea of what my body was supposed to be, right? Like, I'll admit, I'll go to the gym and I'm like, oh, I've lost all that muscle. I don't look very good, right? Because for years, I was simply motivated to look good for others, right? And, you want to feel good for yourself. There's no denying that there's a byproduct of that, right? And when you take it back and you lean in again with something different, it's just different. And so there's a lot of power inside of us. And the biggest power, which of course, I'll just give away the ending of my book right now, the biography of everything. Everything is about love, but true love. And so, like everything, we have to define that. And we're not there yet, because I don't know that we're capable of understanding that yet, to be perfectly honest. Because as a society at the present moment, we don't even have self-love, So how do you talk about love of all things, right? So that'll be that for now. Thank you, everybody who is in the TikTok live, who showed up even for a second. I appreciate you. This might be our normal Sunday morning, is I'll just live stream the podcast, because why not? And then the podcast is on my YouTube. And my books are all over the place. I'm trying to organize them all. Let me tell you something. Hey, thanks. The truth is, I shaved my head for my haircut. Someone said, nice haircut. Thank you so much. I'll tell you a quick story. When I lost my job, when I departed from my job in a dramatic form, because I knew what I was doing. I was pushing the envelope, and I was going to see how far I could take it before. That's a whole story that I'm not going to get into right now. But I was a little bit in the press locally here in Minneapolis. And I was seeing pictures, because I had this haircut. I don't know what this haircut I didn't like very much. And suddenly I'm in the newspaper with this haircut. I was like, no. So I shaved my head. And this friend of mine was like, well, Becca, you sure do you. And I'm like, yeah, we're just starting over. No one gets to judge me based on that haircut that I was growing out. So it was all gone. Now it's just growing out. That was in July, early July. Well, I mean, it was the initial event was April, and then as things went on, I was just like, no, we're just gonna start over. So now it's just short. Yeah, thank you again to everyone who showed up. This is fun. So I'm figuring out how to do dual screens. I've got my podcasty thing over here. I look much better on TikTok because it helps smooth over the my scowly, squinty, Sami eye, squinty lines. Again, everything is light. It's the truth. Thank you so much for coming to what was once called and probably will always be called Not Church O'Clock. And the next time we will talk about astronomy more. But if you want, we're going to talk about astronomy more, but then the next full episode, I didn't talk about Methuselah. Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't like Stonehenge, the pyramids, and then the next topic is physics. Fine, of course it is. Of course it's physics. But I always talk about physics. So, yeah, thank you so much. And I would keep talking because I love talking, obviously, about these things. Philosophy is without question my favorite topic. But outside of that, we still have to go. Like, I don't go to church, but I read the Bible and things come to me, right? So the Great Commission, right, which I think is completely misinterpreted if you grew up in the church, of like, now go out, right? I love philosophy and I'm a firm believer in philosophy, and I think it's so important. What is going on? Some weird things happening with my TikTok. So that we are meant to then go live, what we've learned. And that is not as easy as it might seem. We have to go out and then live embodying all that we've learned about that how genuinely, how little all these things that we get wound up about matter. Right? What matters is truth, and the truth of love, and all the metrics with which, like, what is this frame, right? So anyway, I go on and on and on. That's my Great Commission, is to go out and live it, because living your life with knowledge that you have is the best way for people to go, what is that, right? How are they able to do these things? More on that the next time. But personally, here's my big pitch, big finish, which I've now teased several times and it hasn't happened. Big finish, I want to bring back dark sky. Because if we don't have dark sky, I don't know what, we are missing something. And of course, everyone wants to be able to watch TV at night and do things at night. But it is actually very damaging to not just our individual selves, but our entire world. So if I were running for president of the United States, that would be one of my things. I think it's very important, my fellow Americans, that we embrace our knowledge and our understanding of astronomy and the stars, and that we make it that every single state has a designated dark sky space, which would obviously probably have to be a national park. Otherwise, people squeeze in on the space, right, with their light pollution, unless it's designated. And then everyone would get mad because they'd say, I'm taking away land. And then it would be like, well, okay, sorry. This is why I love Nevada, by the way. Nevada's got like dark sky, dark sky, dark sky, dark sky. All right. Take care, everybody. Happy Sunday. Wherever you are, I hope you have a beautiful day. Until next time, Thompson out. Thank you so much for listening to Zeros and Ones with Becka Thompson. Please subscribe and share.